Can you make it, or you prefer to wait and then relax at home and at your tempo and then try to solve this problem out later on? It doesn't matter. Okay, I check with my email right now whether you have done it or not, and then after this we can have your answer back, whether it is corrected or not. Now, okay, that is the story of morpheme-based morphology, right? Another two approaches that we are going to deal with, okay? What does it mean by lexeme-based morphology? When we talk about morpheme-based morphology, it means that we get the morphemes. We get the meaningful unit from the morpheme, try to find out. Now we just try to get the morphemes from the lexeme, okay? Now, from the lexeme, this approach, the linguists just call it item and process. Get the item and then take the process of finding out the morphemes from this way, okay? What does it mean by this? The item and process, or lexeme-based morphology, means instead of study a word, okay, that now come to the word form again, because when you study the language, one thing that you have to do is you have to form the word. You have to understand the word, and you have to be able to create the words. So you have to know the grammatical rules from the smallest unit, from the morphemes. Otherwise, you cannot form the words at all. Otherwise, you cannot build up the words. Otherwise, you cannot create the new words at all, okay? So instead of studying a word form as a set of morphemes, like we did before, before we put the morpheme set in sequence, creating, yeah? And we have something else, houses, house is, in English. Yeah? But for the lexeme-based morphology, it means that a word form, when you form the word, it is the result of applying rules that change or alter the word form or stem in order to produce a new one. So lexeme-based morphology is trying to get the morphemes from the rules that they change the form of the word according to being morphemes, okay? What does it mean by changing the form? We change the forms because we want to get the new word, okay? So this is the way that when we talk about the lexeme-based morphology, it means that you have to get the lexeme, find out the lexeme. What are the group of the words that do not change the money but change the form, okay? Like we talked about before, talk, talked, talking, talks, something like that, okay? Okay, this is another exercise that you have to identify the morphemes from the lexeme, okay? This one, okay, this is one of the lexeme, one form of the lexeme. We have more than that. Shipper, you have more than this. Okay, try to look at this. You have to try to get the morphemes out of this. I give you only one form because for the ship you can have shipper, shipping, ships, the shipped, that is a set of words that mean the same thing but have changed different form. Okay, one form of the lexeme, it contains morphemes like this. Here we would like to get the morphemes, right? This is a kind of that I show you, okay? Another way of obey, we have a lot of this changing form of this word. Obey, obeyed, obeying, disobey, something like that. Disobeying, okay? This is a kind of set of forms that put together by having different changing form, and all of the changing form just come from the different morphemes that put it in that. Okay, I put one form of obey for you and I have the morpheme to here. For example, you have to explain to this, and I ask you to draw a word tree or the tree diagram to explain this, just to say that how many morphemes you get from this form of the lexeme. Okay, so there are 10 together here. Okay, it means that each word has many forms: resettled, resetting, settling, settled. Okay, have a lot of forms in one particular morpheme. Okay, so this is the way. Try to get morphemes out of this form of lexeme. Okay, and draw the tree diagram for that, where we call a word tree. See, remember that the tree diagram that I showed you before last week, that is the way. Try to make it, you know, and if you cannot do that, set up the question so that we can come back to the tree diagram. But if you read the book written by Noam Chomsky, you will understand about the tree diagram, because he introduced that kind of analyzing or explaining or describing the word from that. Okay, so I have 10 words here, and each word has a lot of alternative forms, have changing form, you know. This has a shipper, ships, shipping, chippering, something like that. You can take a look, you know, from the dictionary and get the forms of ship in different forms. That different forms occur because having more morphemes. Okay, and you have to explain that what kind of this is this bound or free, you know, and this is the bound or free, putting together. Okay, so you have this shipper, disobey, resettle, anticlimaxes, disengagement, simply, jumping, digitize, activity, confrontational. Okay, see how many morphemes out of this one form of lexeme. Okay, is it clear that you can make it? Okay, I give you this exercise and do as your homework and send the answer to me before our next week. Okay, but for the morpheme base, I'm sure you can make it. If you understand the morpheme base and how to make it, you can understand the lexeme based morphology as well. Okay, and now we come to the word based morphology. What does it mean by that? Okay, this one we call word and paradigm approach. Paradigm in the column, you know, and the set of the word. What does it mean by that? You know, so the word-based morphology is to study about morphemes, but instead of stating rules, to combine morphemes into word forms. Because according to the lexeme, we have to explain, we have to understand the rules that combine the morphemes into verb forms. For example, shipper, that I mentioned before, it comes from ship and right? It means that the ship is free and is suffix. And must be put at the end. You cannot put in anywhere else. You know, in English, you have to do that. That is the rule, that the suffix must be put in the end. What are the suffix in English? You have many things, okay? So you have to change the words by you explain the rules. If you are going to work with the lexeme-based morphology. But instead of telling the rules to combine morpheme into word form, or to generate words form from stem, or to build up the new words from stem, the word-based morphology just give the generalization that hold between the forms of inflectional paradigm. What does it mean? The word-based morphology state generalization. It just gives the general rules that hold between the forms, that occur between the forms of inflectional paradigms of the set. Okay. For example, of the word example of the word-based morphology. You know Pali or Bali in Thai. Okay. In Pali language, we have the rules that we call the case rule. You know, mean the rules that control the word into paradigm, into the columns of cases. In Thai, case means vipat, right? So the cases of purisa means man in Pali, that we have different paradigm of the singular paradigm and the plural paradigm in different forms. Okay, the first one, the first case is nominative case. It means that when you use this one as a noun, as a subject or the object in the sentences in Pali, okay, you instead of having purisa, if you want to say that one man, you just use puriso, and if you make the plural, it is purisa, right? Please check whether I'm correct or not. The second case is accusative. It means the object of, if you put purisa, purisa means man, as the object in the sentence, you have to use this form. You see? And according to the singular quorum and the plural quorum, you have different forms. So you have to get the what I call the morphemes out of this. Puriso, what is it? It is purisa plus what? Plus suffix, or so plus prefix. Puri, you have to understand this. Which is the base, B-A-S-E, base, foundation, the stem or the free, and what are the affixes. So you have to be able to divide properly, correctly. It means that you have to understand Pali in here. Okay? So this is the way that we I that we are going to study about the paradigm of cases in Pali. Does this one exist in English? Well, English has a different set of, I mean the certain form of cases morphemes. I don't think so. See, probably you have, the affix s and us or the, if you want to make singular and plural, but not very complicated like or consistent like in Pali. So you have to understand this language if you are going to, classify or investigate the morphemes out of this. The one who knows Pali will understand that this is Purisa plus something, Purisa plus something. But if you don't understand the language, you probably get the wrong answer, okay? In the third case of Pali, instrumental, you have to use this form for singular, Purisena, and you have to use this form for plural, Purisehi or Purisepi, okay? And dative, the fourth one, about the meaning of this form, right? You have Purisasa, Purisaya or Purisatang as a singular. I mean, any form of this, will be the dative one. It depends on where you're going to put it in the sentence. And you have to study the Pali language, Pali grammar. Otherwise, you will not know about this form. And you have to remember for Purisa, it must go this way, okay? For the ablative case in Pali, you have to use this form. So this paradigm have the consistent of, affix and morphemes, free morpheme or stem, I don't know, this one that you have to explain yourself because you know Pali as well, okay? And for the genetic case of Pali, for the word Purisa, you have to form the word this way. And you see that there are 8 cases of the word of the noun in Pali. So you have to know what kind of bound form, what kind of free form that you are going to put in this. If this one cannot occur, Purisa cannot occur by itself, it can occur by itself all the time. If it cannot, you call it this one is bound. But if you can have it, for example, the 8th case in Pali, you have Purisa occur by itself. It means one man, okay? But you use function as vocative. If you call someone, Purisa, hey man, okay, you use this one. So this one would be free. Otherwise, if you have to look at the other words, if the form cannot occur by itself, it must be bound, okay? If it can occur by itself, it can be free. You see, this one. If you just say that, you have the reason why you call the Purisa as the free, because you say that, okay, in vocative, Purisa can occur. Okay? So, in Pali, you have to understand and you have to remember. You have to be clarify by yourself what kind of morphemes are there in the word. You see, you have the whole paradigm, the whole column that use different shape, different form. So here there are 8 cases, and you have at least 16 different words that you have to know. You have to use it, each one correctly or properly when you describe the Pali. So I would ask you, how many suffixes are there? How many affixes are there? Are there any suffixes? Are there any prefixes in Pali? How about this one? What kind of word formation made from morphemes? So this is, you can call the word-based morpheme. Okay? So this is the way that I would like you to be clear about this, before we go on next week. So this week we are going to try to talk about the theory or the approach to get the morphemes. How many ways that you can do that, you see? Okay? At least today we know that we have 3 ways. Okay, you can get the data, collect the data from the morpheme themselves. Okay, talking about how many morphemes are there, what are they, what do they mean, and then you can get the lexeme, the set of the words that have different shape, and then you explain what are the rules that are used in making those shape different from each other, and then how many morphemes are there. Okay, and then you get the words, how many words they use in each paradigm, in each meaning, in each function, and then you can get morphemes out of that. That's what we call word-based morphology, right? So, and next week we are going to talk about the what we call the morphological analysis in detail. Okay, but for today, in brief, I would like to remind you, at least, to once again try to get the meaning of morphology. That when we talk about morphemes, when we study morphology, it includes at least one, gathering morphemes. You see that we have discussed today, right? First of all, you have to gathering morphemes. If you want to get your morphology scientific, okay? First of all, you have to gather data. It means that you are going to gather morphemes. From what? From the morpheme sequence. Now, you have to study about the morphemes. You see? Well, we can get it from the sentence, from the word, from the phrase, or from anything. And then you just explain, get the arrangement of the morphemes. Or you can get gather the data from the lexeme. Okay? It means that how many sets of the words that have different shapes but contain the same meaning. Okay, that is what we call lexeme. So we can take the words from that, and then you can explain. For example, talk. You said that talk is a free morpheme plus zero morpheme because you didn't see the shape. But you said that talk just function different from talking and from talked, okay, or talked. in English, something like that. Okay, that is, you can get the data from lexeme, or you can get the data from the words. There are many words. That how many words that you would like to explain, you get the morpheme. Try to get as much as possible, okay? So that is the way that we talk about the scientific way. Okay, when we study morphology, you are required to know. It means to know the morphemes. So you just get the meanings properly. You have to understand the meaning of the morphemes, right? Otherwise you cannot say which one is morpheme, which one is not. By you have to know what? Okay, at least you have to know the shape, the form, and you have to know the meaning, and you have to know the function that we call grammatical rules. Okay, otherwise you cannot get the morphemes. Because when we talk, when we are going to concentrate on the analysis, you know, we are going to talk about what we call the forms identification in detail, the meanings in detail, and the function in details. That is what we are going to do together next week, okay? And if you are going to do morphology, or if you are going to study about the morphemes, okay, you have to analyze to get the morphemes. When you analyze, or when you do analysis, what do you have to get? Okay. First of all, you have to know how to apply principles. The principles or the methods that you are going to use. How you are going to analyze, how can you apply, what principle that you are going to apply to get morphemes. You have to understand that. This is what we are going to discuss together next time, okay? And if you are going to analyze something, here we are going to analyze to find out morphemes, right? Okay, you have to try to find the numbers of morphemes. How can we get the numbers of the morphemes? From the data we get, you see? That is what we are going to explain later on, you know. How many morphemes are there in one particular language? That is the great job. Maybe you have to spend the whole life, you know, to try to get that. That is why linguistics is with you all the time, see? And when you analyze to get the morphemes, you have to try to find the form and the meaning relation of each morpheme. How can you know that this form is morpheme? How can you know that the meaning of which form is morpheme? See? So we are going to talk about the form and the meaning relation, right, to this. And when we analyze morphemes, we are going to talk about the problems of analyzing the morphemes, and of course we have to try to get the solution out of that, you see. So it means that when you analyze something, you have to look for the problems. If you are going to work on your thesis, for example, you have to look for the problems, because you have to analyze the problems and try to get the answer out of that. We call solution out of that. Okay, morpheme is just small thing that we have to do. Thesis is rather big, and research, you know, later on after you finish your study, is going to be bigger and bigger job to work, because in this class only one problem that you are going to talk about is the problem on morphology. see. But when you graduate, the problem that occur in your life are so many and big ones. So this is the way that we are going to practice by being scientific-minded yourself. So you have to know about the scientific methods just to learn to solve the problem together by knowing how to analyze things, knowing how to analyze something that you assign to. So here is the beginning of running your life properly after you graduate, okay? And after you analyze, of course, you have to show, you have to present that you know, that you understand, you have cover, and you explain all the data properly, completely. So you have to show that, okay, here are the categories of what you have studied or you have found, okay? So this is what we are going to discuss in detail about this, okay? And when you study morphology or when you study to find out morphemes, you have to learn how to describe. In language description, you know, you have to describe the structure, you have to describe the finding from you get from your data gathering. For the morphemes, we can end up our description in three things. You know, when you study the morphemes, you have to end up your morphemes in the glossary, I mean the set or the box of the vocabulary or the words, you know, that contain meanings and function. You have to tell. For example, the good glossary, it is the description of the word. For example, the word that contains both meaning, function, and forms. And if it is perfect, you can tell about the pronunciation as well, okay? So that would be a good glossary. And the perfect and the bigger form, bigger shape of glossary, that you have cover more data, I mean description. You just describe the morpheme study in the dictionary form, okay? Probably you have, for example, in English, you have the suffix dictionary in English. So it doesn't matter, it might be big or small, but you have covered all the suffixes occur in English language. We call suffix dictionary. But if you would like to talk about the affix dictionary, it means you list all the prefix, all the suffix, all the circumfixes, or the infix occur in English. So it depends, you know, of the data you gather when you do morphology. Well, if you do a little, for example, if you are going to work on only a small number or a certain number of data that you gather, you would like to be specific, that you would like to talk about this kind of morpheme, you can write a report. So it depends on what kind of materials you are going to produce to tell about your description about morphology, you see. So this is the way that you are going to talk about that. Remember that when we talk about the analyzing morpheme, so applying, finding number, finding form meaning, finding problems, finding solution, finding categorization, this would be the process of analyzing. This would be called the content of the analysis when you do with something. So if you are going to analyze morphemes, you have to apply principle to get the morphemes. If you are going to find the number of in morphology, you have to find the number of morphemes existing in the language or existing in the data that you gather. So you see that it depends on the data, how big your data gathering is. So this is the way. So maybe we can spend our lifetime, the whole life, trying to explain about the morphemes of one particular language. You see, right now what I'm doing now that I would like to show you maybe next week when we talk about the dictionary that I'm working on. I'm working on the word-by-word translation of the Pitaka. So the 45 books together is a long and bigger one. I don't know whether in my life I'm going to finish that, but I'm going to try to get as many as possible. So right now I have, the dictionary. It means the word-by-word dictionary. So it means that I have one Pali word, and then I have the meaning out of that, just only the meaning of the word. I haven't gone to morphemes yet because that is a big job, because I have to study and I have to be clarified in Pali language. I have to understand grammar. I have to know the grammatical rules of all levels, no matter the grammatical rules for Pali semantic, for Pali syntax, for Pali morphology, for Pali phonology. Okay? So this is the big thing. But I'm working on that. Probably I show you next time that what I have finished, some of those. I have word-by-word translation in Thai language. I have word-by-word translation translate in English by working with a lot of people who are the expert in Pali language and in Thai and in English language as well. Okay, so this is what we are working together. So when you talk about the morphemes, the practice one is that, okay, try to get the data gathering at a certain number. Okay, how many words you are going to cover? For example, from the exercise, I give you only 10 words, right? That you are going to analyze. That is so small, because how many words are there in the English? My goodness. See, more than 10,000, more than million maybe. Okay, we haven't counted yet, but you can try on that. Okay, so when you study morphology, it means that you try to get number of morphemes. Okay, you have to, after your analysis, you have to present what you have found. Okay, what you are going to tell when you do morphology. Okay, you have to present the types of morphemes, as many as possible. And if you are going to study 6,500 languages of this world, you have tried to get the types of morphemes from those 6,500. Can you do that in your whole life? I'm not so sure. But if you work together in team, the bigger team, the faster job the faster success you're gonna get. Okay? Well, when you come to morphology, it means that if you would like to get morphemes, you have to present how many types you know, how many types you have. At least here we have 3 languages. You have to be specialized, or you have to be expert in your own language, English and Pali. Okay? For those who have been in Thailand quite a time, you probably have 4 languages. Your language, your own language, Thai, English, Pali. Okay? So this is the way that we are going to talk about the presentation of the analysis. So you have to tell about the types of each language that you study. Okay? You have to be able to tell the forms. How many forms are there? And you have to tell the meanings. How many meanings are there? One form, many meanings. Many forms, one meaning. You have to look for that. See? And this is must be done through your analysis. So next time we are going to talk about the principles that you should learn how to do that. Okay? And then you have to know the relevancy with language. It means that when you present the types and the forms and meaning of the morphemes, you have to think about the relatedness or the relations with the other levels in the language structure. Remember that when we discussed about the language structure, at least you have to know, at least you have to study about 3 things. First, you have to study semantics. You have to study the meaning of the language. How many meanings, what kind of meanings, that is one big job. Okay, you have to study about the syntax. So you have to know the grammar of one particular language very well, so that you can use the language properly, so that you can use it as communicating with the other people very well. Okay? You have to study morphology. How can you create the words? How can you make the words function? And from what that you are going to create the words? You know, to make it in form of lexemes, or make it in form of arrangement of morphemes. That is what we call relevancy with the morphology if you study a language. Okay? And then you have to learn, you have to know phonology. You have to know about the types and the manners and the way that you articulate the sounds when you speak out. For example, when I speak, how can I create those sounds? From what? From where? And how? And how many will I get? So you have to learn how many sounds are there in one particular language. And if you are interested, you can study as many languages as you want. There are so many things in this world about linguistics that you can study. And more than anything else, when you make the analysis of the morphemes, you have to be able to present the structure level of the morphemes. And how can the structure level of morpheme be put in the language just to build up language correctly, grammatically, you know, later on. Why we have to do that? Of course, if you are going to communicate with the people in this world, you have to understand linguistics. One level, one thing of linguistics might be not enough, but at least it helps you to go on and keep on studying. Okay? So this is what we have done together for the 3 weeks that we are going to meet each other. Next week, I think that we can go on morphological analysis in details. So probably we can have more than exercise, more than examples. That I would like you to go around and look and read more about morphological analysis, either from Google Book or from the books from the library that you have, or from the references that I have mentioned before. At least, if you take a look at the first week of our lecture, of our discussion, you get the name of Nida, and you get the name of some other linguists who wrote about this morphology. You can explain to that. Okay? So this is, I'm going to ask you that from this time to the next week, just to be sure and check on your understanding and your readings. Please answer 2 questions that I am going to ask you. That we have learned about 3 approaches to get the morphemes, right? One is morpheme-based approach. Second one is the lexeme-based approach. And the third one is the word-based approach. We can have 3 ways to know about morphology. But I tell you, as a matter of fact, there are more than 3 by some linguists. Can you find out the other approaches that you know about morphology? Remember that I mentioned, I give you a hint that according to the language structure, we have semantic, right? We have phonology, and we have syntax. Here we just talk about morpheme only. And just in the area of morpheme, that it function very close to each other, is the word and the lexeme. But still, you can get more data and more way to approach from the other levels of the language structure as well. You see, think about that. Try to get the book about the structure of language, about morphology, or the theoretical linguistics, or semantic, or syntax, and then you will probably get the other approach. If you cannot find, just let me know, answer this. If you know, just tell what are they, or what it is, and how they do with that. It means that what is the explanation, what is the definition of that, okay? Another question that I have to, I would like you to answer. You can write it down as long as you want, for the answer of these 2 questions. Another question that, okay, the easiest way to study morphology is try to find out the morphemes from your native language. I would let you do that. So here in this class, we have people from different countries. We have people from different backgrounds. So you just pick up your native language, either Thai or Burmese or Sinhalese or Hindi or even Pali that you're expert in. You give example of 3 approaches to morphology from that language that you try to explain. For example, in Thai, I give you one example. The morpheme base, you know, that you know that Thai language, they have vowel morpheme and vowel morpheme, right? Two vowel morphemes arranged next to each other and be consistent. So this is, for example, if you are to get meaning of the house, okay, you have to get one vowel, ban, and you have to get the tone. It must be the falling tone only. It will mean house. So that is house. So in Thai is ban, right? You cannot put in other tones. Otherwise, it's going to get another meaning. You see, if you make the wrong tone, ban means, you know, a piece of window, right? As you classify the window. Or ban, if it's a verb, you see, that it means that blooming, or extend, or expand. See, so this is the nature of the morpheme-based morphology. If you are going to study, the lexeme, you see that in Thai, one meaning, you have different forms of the morphemes in Thai or not. For example, one meaning, tree in Thai. What do you have? You have ต้นไม้, right? You have พฤกษา, right? You have something else. Do you have that? Why? That is the lexeme. One meaning, group of words that change the form or change completely the form. But you will be able to explain the word-based meaning. You have to, do you have the paradigm of the word when you change? For example, when you use as the subject, you change the form or not? When you use as the object, you change the form or not? You explain, you know. In one particular language, there might be all those three approaches that you can find morphemes. But in some particular language, you cannot. You have only one approach. For example, you explain to that. You can write down in one of the paper, you see, for your study, for your thesis requirement. Here, I think that you can do that. For example, you explain that the approach to morphology in Thai, approaches to morphology in Pali, approaches to morphology in English, for example. You can do that, you know, and you can write what we call Sara Nipon, right? The thesis in your job this way. So I think that I will stop here, and the rest of the time left here, I would like you to sit down and think about the question that you are going to ask, and can write it down back to me immediately. I will take a look and then I answer back. Okay? So we have about, let's say, 10 minutes left, and if I can answer anything right now, not in personal contact, you know, but I can answer back to your line group or anything that you ask, or through the email, I can answer within, you know, next hour or so. So I hope that we can contact this way by having your questions, and then I can send back my answer if I can answer. Okay? Mhm. Anything that you would like to know about morphology this way. And next week we are going to talk about the principles that it's possible to get the morphemes out of one particular language. Maybe I'm going to introduce you some other languages that you don't know. You see that when we talk about linguistic, you mean you study about language, it doesn't mean that we are going to study about the language that we know. As I have mentioned before, we can have morphology. We can find the morphemes out of the languages that we are not familiar with. You can do that, you know. We are going to discuss about that later on, because if you know the principle, if you know the method to analyze, if you know how to describe, if you know how to gather the data, I think that you can do any language of the world. See, this one. Because most of the linguists, I mean one who study linguistics, does that way. When I study linguistics myself, when I study morphology, I have to learn how to identify the morphemes out of the language that I don't know. I let you know next time, you know, how can I gather the data, right? And when you know about the way, when you know about the approach, and when you know about the technique, you can do any language of the world. And it will be a lot of fun, you know, when you are going to study about the morphemes of the one particular language that you are not familiar with, because you have to gather the data, and you will learn where can you get the data and how can you get the data of the language that you don't know. For example, if you go to Africa, you don't have to go to Africa right now, because you can get the language out of Google from the internet. But long time ago, when I was young, and if we are going to study one unknown language, one language that we are not familiar with, we have to go to that area. That's why we have to get the technique of anthropological linguistics as well before you go in there, before we study the structure of language itself, before we know how to, before we just be able to get the data out of the language in the unknown area, the unknown place. How can we do that? Okay, that is the way. We talk about that next week. Okay, thank you for this week, and I'm sure that I'm waiting for your questions, and I'm very willing to answer all kinds of things that you might ask. Don't be hesitated, you know, to tell me that you don't understand. What point that you don't understand, I can write down the answer in personally, so that each one can go on with the assignments, and each one can go on with the answer that you are going to ask the question to me, you know, even during the first week or the second week or this week as well. What part that you are not so clear, just let me know, so that we can work together next week. Thank you very much for today. Have a good time, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.